So, when's the last time you got rewarded for brushing your teeth, right? Guess what? With Quip's Smart Electric Toothbrush, good habits can actually earn you some great perks, like free products, gift cards, and more. Go to getquip.com/wolf. Go right now. You save $10 on a Quip Smart Electric Toothbrush. Hey, everybody. Jordan Belfort here, the Wolf of Wall Street in the Wolf's Den. My new house here in Miami, which I love being at. By the way, I'm looking at the water. I wish you were looking at the same view as me because it's awesome. But I got a great guest today in a space that I am a big fan of. Interesting, because I used to be a bear, and now I'm a bull. I'll tell you why throughout this podcast. But I have Peter McCormack, who is a major Bitcoin podcaster, very well known, has a podcast called What Bitcoin Did. I think it comes out twice a week. Is it right? Is it 2 times or once a week?
Twice, 3 times. Depends on how the week is.
Depends what's going on with Bitcoin, right? So everyone, yeah. Peter McCormack. Peter, how are you today?
I'm good, Jordan. How are you, man? Good to talk to you.
Likewise. So, so my history with Bitcoin is really interesting. So I made like one of the greatest calls ever and one of the worst calls ever, all wrapped up into one. When Bitcoin was in 2017, when Bitcoin was approaching 20,000, like almost to the day that it top tick, I'm like, this thing is going, it's gonna crash, it's like so overvalued, and I was like right on the money. But then I also said it's going to zero and never coming back. So I was wrong on that side. So I was like half right and half wrong, probably more wrong than right. But at the time, it was a great call, and it seemed pretty obvious to me. I think it seemed pretty obvious to a lot of people, except there was some people who were saying it's going to 1 million overnight, and that's what was really bothering me. And there was really 2 things, Peter, that made me a really major Bitcoin bear. The first was all the people who I think just are honestly not well-intentioned, saying it's going to 1 million, it's going to it's going straight, it's going to replace the dollar, it's going to 1 million, like they were saying, like it was happening right away, and I thought it was idiotic and ridiculous. And the reason seemed pretty obvious to me is you can't get people to keep buying it unless you have these wild, exaggerated moves upwards. So I just thought it was ridiculous. To say it's going to replace the dollar, I thought was ridiculous. Like the next 5 years, there'll be no more dollar, right? That was 4 years ago. But the real reason why I thought Bitcoin had no shot was simply sovereign intervention. That was it. That my big thing was I always said I love blockchain. I think blockchain is going to have many, many use cases. And one of them I don't think is going to be for currency, because I cannot imagine a sovereign government like the United States just allowing this to happen. And to think that they can stop it, I think is nonsense. They can't. They could have stopped it. They still can stop, but I don't think they will. I think it's gone too far. But they can stop if they were real. Like China said, no more Bitcoin. If everyone got together, I think we're past that point. But that my real reason was sovereign risk, Peter. That, why would a government allow a competing currency? So what do you have to say about that?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. A lot to unpack. Okay, I think anyone back in 2017 claiming Bitcoin was going to go to $1 million in that kind of run, I would agree with you. I think they're completely wrong. But will Bitcoin, or can Bitcoin go to $1 million on a long enough time frame in the next decade? I mean, it's possible.
I think it very well might. I think more $500,000, I think, is a pretty solid estimate of where it could, but it could go higher at this point. But I think we both agree that it was like this. It was pretty obvious to me, like what was going on back then. Is a lot of people were just, they had to keep creating this crazy next move up, because why are the average people going to buy? If it's going from 20,000 to 40,000, it's not exciting enough anymore. It's got to be like, right? So I think we both agree. But yeah. You also agree that I think now there's been a major paradigm shift here, and the upside could very well be $1 million. To me, I think I did some math on this with a very, very smart guy, someone I respect, named Tika Tavari. He was on my podcast recently, and I think he made a mathematical case that made a lot of sense to me for 500,000 over time, barring any massive government intervention that would set it back. So yeah, I think that's the first. What do you think about the other aspect of what I was saying in terms of just, generally speaking, that, the government? Do you think at that time, were you worried about government intervention or no?
I'll answer that, but let me just finish on,
Sure.
Which I think is an important point for your listeners, is to say, price targets can always be misleading. They can always get you hyped into following something or buying something at the wrong time. So rather than just say, of course it could go to $500,000 or $1 million, I think the more important point is the design of the protocol and the design of the currency means that on a long enough time frame, every 4 years, the price is most likely to increase in value. So it's a sensible thing to hold. And we can get back into that at some point. In terms of government intervention, it was definitely something on my mind. It's definitely something that's always on my mind because there is multiple ways governments can harm Bitcoin. One, they can ban it. Something I think is quite difficult in the US. I think it's quite difficult because I think it's protected under free speech laws. But also, there's so much happening now, especially in places like Texas, with the growth of mining here, the number of jobs, the amount of wealth that's held in Bitcoin. It doesn't make any logical sense for them to ban it.
I think it's got enough traction and connection to the centralized financial system right now that I believe that it would be challenged legally many places along the way. And I just think that it would be really fucking irresponsible for the government to now, after they just listed ETFs, so like, all right, gotcha, now that you all got the ETF, oops, it just doesn't seem like the regulatory winds are blowing in that direction. And frankly, I think the sooner the government regulates Bitcoin, the better it is for Bitcoin and everyone else. Like, I personally, I know some people disagree vehemently, I believe the quicker the government gets involved and regulates this, the quicker it will go and the higher it will go. And just to reiterate, I agree with 1,000%. Making price predictions, who knows where the fuck Bitcoin is going? To say it's going anywhere, when I see that stuff, it absolutely enrages me because, it could go to $1. It's obviously probably not, but who knows where some asset that's volatile is going to go tomorrow? You don't really know. So you could think it's going to go somewhere, you could project it to be somewhere, but let's just face facts that the bottom line is that chances are that Bitcoin will probably go up if you believe you're a bull, but you don't know. There's risk.
Yeah, and on the regulatory side of things, I think, Bitcoin is already regulated in a number of ways. We have a number of, when I say we, I mean the US. We already have pretty strict KYC, AML laws in place, which Bitcoin is governed under, money transmitter licenses, the SEC, the CFTC, FinCEN, they all have rules of which Bitcoin companies must follow. One of the things they can do, though, or a couple of things the government could do, which wouldn't be banning Bitcoin, but just kind of reduces its attractiveness, is over-regulate it. Yeah, well, firstly, it's over-regulating. There's the infrastructure bill coming out, or it's in, I think it was passed in Congress, but it has to go, it's got another round. That has a couple of provisions in it, which makes it a little bit more difficult to use Bitcoin. So that's the kind of thing they can do. And also potential tax on unrealized gains, if that's something that the Biden administration looks in. They're the kind of things that can harm Bitcoin's adoption and growth, or harm its attractiveness. But, Bitcoin is already highly regulated. And another thing I just wanted to note on is I'm obviously a Bitcoin guy, and there's this long-standing war between Bitcoin and crypto people. And you said you see a lot of use cases for blockchain. I personally see it differently. I see... Yes, the design of a blockchain can be used for a number of different things, but most of the things it's being used for, it doesn't need to be. I actually think Bitcoin is the only thing that actually requires a blockchain. If you understand the role of a blockchain and what a blockchain does, which is to fight state attacks, to be as decentralized as possible, then Bitcoin uses a blockchain correctly. Most other things which use a blockchain, actually, they don't really need to use a blockchain. So I'm less interested in the world of crypto, and I'm much more interested in the world of Bitcoin.
First of all, how long have you been involved in Bitcoin?
So I first discovered Bitcoin, I forget when it was, 2012, 2013, around then, when a friend introduced me to this website called the Silk Road, where I could buy drugs online, which was very cool, a lot of fun. And so I bought Bitcoin back then, but I never really looked at it.
Did you use Silk Road?
Yeah, a lot.
For what drugs were you buying? I have to ask because I'm so interested in this.
I was a big cokehead back then. I'm 8 years clean now, 7 years clean. But back then I was a big cokehead, and the great thing about the Silk Road is it solved the problem of the product. The product is inconsistent from street dealers, but with a website where you can buy from, you had reviews of the dealers. So you would just put them in. Who's the highest reviewed, and you'd see all the reviews. It's like, okay, this guy, he's got the best Coke. I'll buy from him, and it was always.
How good was the Coke? Was it really good? It was amazing.
Yeah, it was great Coke. Yeah, you could as somebody who was a bit of an addict at the time, you could function, you could eat, you could live your normal life rather than have the kind of downers. But it was expensive. You paid double the price, but it was great.
I'm sober 20 years, and that still somehow just attracts me for some reason. I still hear that I just want to be involved in it, even though I don't do coke anymore for like since 1997. It just makes me just jealous that like I missed that. But anyway, so that was your introduction to Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I'm 7 or 8 years sober now, and
congratulations!
I had some fun back then. Thank you. But so what happened was then, the Silk Road got closed down. I stopped taking drugs. Didn't really pay much attention to Bitcoin until the end of 2016, when I rediscovered it, and discovered Ethereum was happening, and I dived back in. So in all seriousness, whilst I discovered it in 2013, my real Bitcoin journey has been it's coming up to 5 years now.
Got it. And so you briefly said you mentioned Ethereum as well. So you're not a fan of Ethereum.
I mean, I don't have hate for it. I just don't care for it. I think it's. I think what Ethereum is trying to do has some interesting things. If you're the kind of person that's into that, if you want to trade NFTs and such, but I just don't think it needs a blockchain. I think it's got some technical challenges coming up when it tries to move to proof of stake, and I also think being a proof of stake consensus protocol. It's essentially rebuilding what we already have in the current financial system where the rich get richer. And I like the idea of Bitcoin and proof of work and having a much more fair monetary system.
So for those people who are novices here and don't understand the terms, what we're talking about here is different ways in which you can essentially prove that a transaction is legitimate or verify it. One way, which is what I think crypto started with, which was something called proof of work, which is solving these complex mathematical problems, and people are competing who can solve it the quickest, and based on who solves the quickest, they get a certain reward in Bitcoin, right? And as the chain grows, the problems get more and more difficult to solve, which makes it harder and harder to get more coins. So it's a very ingenious way of sort of checking the system. So like you have all these different computers rushing to check each transaction to make sure that it's correct. It's not a duplicate, right? And then whoever gets there first gets an award. Versus proof of stake is about if people that own lots of a currency say it's good, right? Is that basically?
Yeah.
A
couple of things on the proof.
If people have a lot of it, they can almost be trusted banks again. So you're right. It does sort of resemble more like, and if the central bank says it's good, then it's good, right? So it's a little bit more, that's what bothers you, right?
A little bit more Cantillon. So just a slight correction. So on proof of work, it's not as the chain grows, the problem gets more complicated to solve. It's as more people mine. So consider it like a competitive market. You run a miner.
They come together, and the chain's growing as more people are getting involved. So the same thing, right?
Yeah, but the problem doesn't get the miners are competing to solve doesn't get more complicated based on the size of the chain. It gets more complicated based on how many people are competing to try and solve that problem, because it wants to keep block times at around 10 minutes.
Is it also based on how many coins are outstanding? It keeps getting more and more difficult with more coins, or no?
No, it's purely based, the difficulty of the problem is purely based on how many people are mining at a time. Because what happens is if 10 machines are competing to solve the problem, and blocks are produced every 10 minutes, if we suddenly have 20 machines competing for that, we're going to halve the block time. So what we have is something called a difficulty adjustment, because more people are mining, and that difficulty adjustment makes it more difficult to solve the problem. But that can go up and down. So when all the miners in China got switched off recently, a huge amount of the hash rate went offline, suddenly the difficulty adjustment adjusted down, and actually the problem got easier to solve. But the complexity of the problem is purely based on how many miners are competing at the time to solve the problem, which is the genius thing of the designers, is to try and keep block times at 10 minutes. But they're competing to solve a problem. Once they solve that problem, they close a block, and 100 blocks later, they receive the block reward, which at the moment is, I think, 3.75 Bitcoin. I'd have to double check that. It's half of 6.2.
So on the flip side of this whole thing, what do you say about the detractors? They go, the amount of energy, and it's just bad for the environment. It's a use of all this energy. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's a red herring, and there's multiple ways to look at it. It's firstly, who gets to choose what is good or bad energy? Christmas lights and washing machines and tumble dryers use a lot of electricity. Are they bad uses of electricity? I think I think Bitcoin is arguably a better use of electricity than Christmas lights. But
clearly, there's a big difference in the amount that's being spent on mining a Bitcoin versus a washing machine.
Well, I'm just saying, generally speaking, there are subjective uses of what energy is, but I think we have to look at it a different way. Is the world has evolved and humanity has evolved and gone through these different step changes in what it's achieved by how it uses energy, from burning wood to discovering oil to being able to transport electricity over vast distances. I think there should be a goal, an objective to have more clean energy, as clean energy as possible. But I think to arbitrarily pick on specific industries based on their energy use, I think is problematic for me. Firstly, because I would argue that Bitcoin is probably the most important use of energy in the world right now. We're fixing money. Money at the moment is fundamentally broken. We're seeing massive inflation around the world. We've seen countries being literally destroyed by bad money. I mean, Lebanon at the moment is in full-scale collapse. Argentina is going through another period of very high inflation. We've seen Venezuela collapse. We've seen Zimbabwe collapse. We see Turkey with high inflation.
We see Germany.
Yeah, in the Weimar, well, that was pre. I think that was pre.
The rise of Nazi Germany was based on part of it. You could say
Bad
could
money.
be drawn back to hyperinflation, where people were bringing wheelbarrows to the store to get loaves of bread, and it paved the way for a dictator to come in and say, "I'm going to fix all this," right?
Yeah, and you could argue that the petrodollar has been the root cause of a number of wars in the Middle East. I mean, bad money has bad incentives. When you can just print money as you choose, you can destroy economies. And when you destroy economies, you destroy education systems, you destroy health systems.
You think the money is the problem or people?
Well, people are the problem, which is why you need well-designed money, because people are greedy and people are corrupt. So if you go into these countries, I mean, Lebanon, like I say, Lebanon is just a great case at the moment. The country is in full-scale collapse, which is seeing medical supplies not being able to reach hospitals, which is seeing imports not coming in. You know, a collapse of a country is very often down to the money. But that's down to the people.
My wife is Argentinian, by the way, just so you know. So
she knows. She knows.
I'm well aware. Her parents are very successful down there, and they have. They, believe it or not, have different types of money there. There's the white rate, the blue rate, the black rate, and they actually, believe it or not, have different rates for small face and big face $100 bills. So if you go there with a newer $100 bill versus the small face, the small face is worth less than the big face. And I was like, what? So I think you bring up one good point, which I absolutely positively agree with, and that is, one of the mistakes we make in the U.S. is that we have a very U.S.-centric view of the world. So we take for granted having a stable dollar or relatively stable dollar. And, because it's the best bad option, so to speak, right? I mean, all the fiat currencies are fucked up, but it's better than most, right? So we take for granted especially as a global reserve currency, it affords us luxuries of doing things that no other country can basically do. We can, borrow, print without really any apparent consequences today, while any other country would simply fall into hyperinflation immediately and there would be a collapse. And I think that when we look at sort of like, people say, I don't think, what's the point of crypto? Yeah, you live in the U.S. You have a bank that works, basically. You have a currency you can rely on. But there's all these places around the world, most places, in fact, don't have that. And that's a really interesting point. That's, I think, is the biggest vote for some sort of, universal currency that makes sense.
Well, I mean, we say that, but the U.S. is certainly going through a period of higher inflation now. It's at 5.4%. Most people would argue it's probably at least triple that if you look at what's happened to house prices at the moment. So whilst the US might not see 30, 40% inflation, certainly people are seeing inflation. But I think once you start to look at the root problem with money, the ability for governments to print and the impact on that, isn't it nice to have something that puts a checks and balance in place for the government, which says, okay, if that's how you're going to treat the money, well, I've got this money that I'm going to own. I'm going to keep my money in this thing called Bitcoin, which you can't print, which is what I do, Jordan. I keep close to 90% of my wealth now in Bitcoin, and no one can steal it from me. I can spend it wherever I want, and the government can't debase it.
Maybe, maybe not. So again, I'm a devil's advocate. I'm a bull. I'm a bull, but I'm going to play the other side for the sake of this conversation, because I think the truth usually lies somewhere in the middle. There's sometimes I wonder myself if, as bad as the Federal Reserve might be, and as ill-conceived and evil and Machiavellian as it might be, there is something to be said about economic policy, the ability to increase the money supply and decrease the money supply to either stimulate or cool off an overheated economy. So, one of the things that, and I think that we've bastardized this over the last 25 years or 30 years, but there is something to be said about having the ability to increase and decrease the money supply to affect economic action. And what you're saying is you're pointing to a completely unproven way of going about, trying to conduct business globally, which is taking away the ability of a sovereign or a central bank to do that, to actually use money supply to influence the economy. And my question is, maybe that's really something that's going to be a disaster, because if we get into a depression or a very strong recession, and so there is no way now to print more money to stimulate the economy, it can very quickly become a deflationary spiral with no way out. And then we saw that happen in the 30s, and it was a fucking disaster. So I think there's something to be said on the other side. What do you think about that?
Well, I think we've bastardized it for 50 years now. Because
50,
back in 1970...
72,
1971.
So, 50,
71
with the gold standard. So 71, yeah, we're getting closer to 50. So yeah, okay. But I think we really but I think we've really bastardized it. I'll tell you what I think it was. After the dot-com bubble burst, that to me is when they refused. They're like, no, we're not going to let this fall into recession. We're just going to keep printing fucking money. And after 9/11, if you don't spend, the terrorists win. And that's when it just like all hell broke loose. That was, I think, to me, the moment where it really went bad.
And then 2008, we saw again, and then we're seeing it again now.
They won't let it correct. Exactly. So that's, I think, what really went bad. Yeah.
And I really think the idea of a central bank being able to fix the economy for 330 million people in a fair way, I think it's actually it's kind of an arrogant thing that the Fed have. Because, I mean, you just go back to, there's this brilliant Ray Dalio video about how the economic machine works, and he talks about... you've seen it. I mean, it's brilliant, and he talks about the different cycles and the main cycle, and you have to let these cycles play out. You have to allow these and people to respond to them. And this top-down approach, I really think actually what you end up doing, you kick the can down the road. You kick this economic problem down the road. No doubt,
right? Exactly. That's what I really believe happened in 2000. That was when it really started. It was like they just said, before that, and I agree. So we go up to gold standard in 71, right? But then it's sort of, I remember, I'm older than you, so I remember when they used to, we had 22% interest rates, and then Paul Volcker came in, and he raised it up to calm runaway inflation. Then we had stagflation, but eventually for like about 10 or 15, 20 years, 80s, 90s, you had these there were cycles of sort of up and down and whatnot. Then just something crazy happened at the end of the 90s where they said, no, we're just not going to allow it to go backwards. We're going to kick the economic can down the road, and it's just going to keep printing money. It's going to keep going up and up and up and up. And that's to me when the disconnect started. Really, I think it ran away from itself, so to speak.
I've got a great analogy that I think you'll understand as somebody who used to enjoy drugs. Do you remember when you made the decision? You're like, I've got to come off the drugs. Of course. And how often did you kick that can down the road? Because it's difficult.
Until I reached a point where it was like literally, my life became so out of control and unsustainable that I had no choice. But yeah, I tried to stop. I tried to rein it back in many, many times. And again, it's a good analogy, right?
You have to go through the pain.
What you're saying is, everything you're saying is true on this whole idea about kicking the can down the road. But my point still is, I'm not sure the alternative isn't worse. That's my only point, because I don't know.
That was the point I was coming to. It's like I've had numerous addictions in my life, and I always kick down the can down the road to stop them. But because you don't want to go through that pain, like the pain of stopping. But eventually you do, and it's really difficult. But then you recover. I think the bigger problem the US has now in terms of kicking this economic can down the road is that they're in this position where they're essentially in a game of chicken with China. So for the US to take their finger off the money printer and stop printing money and go into some form of economic recovery, austerity, I think it creates a geopolitical risk against China, which we've seen China's accelerating their space operations. They're accelerating their military advancement. They've now got hypersonic missiles. They're accelerating their soft form of imperialism through the Belt and Road Initiative. Like, China is a huge risk, I think, to the world. And I think the US faces a problem whereby if it goes into some kind of economic austerity, that it hands a different advantage to China. So that's a different risk they face, which has these geopolitical risks. So I don't, whilst I criticize the Fed or central banks, I also think they've got themselves into a very difficult position, which is hard to get out of. And also, which president wants to be the one that takes a finger off the printer? Biden? Sure. Does he want to take his finger off the printer and be remembered as one of the worst presidents in history? Because he'll be blamed for everything. They won't look at what happened under all the previous presidents. They won't look at what happened under Trump. They won't have a look at what happened under Clinton. They won't have a look at what happened under Bush. But whereas these problems have been building up over multiple administrations across both the Republican and the Democratic Party.
So, when's the last time you got rewarded for brushing your teeth, right? Guess what? With Quip's Smart Electric Toothbrush, good habits can actually earn you some great perks, like free products, gift cards, and more. This is something brand new that rewards you and your mouth. The Quip Smart Brush connects to the Quip app with Bluetooth, track when and where and how well you brush, and even get tips and coaching to improve your brushing habits. Beyond the brush, Quip has everything you need to build a complete routine, like flossing, toothpaste, and anti-cavity ingredients, sugar-free gum, and even mouthwash. Start getting rewards for brushing your teeth today. Go to getquip.com/wolf. Go right now. You save $10 on a Quip Smart Electric Toothbrush. That's $10 off a Smart Electric Toothbrush at getquip.com/wolf. Spelled GETQUIP.com/wolf. Quip is the good habits company. All right, when it comes to gambling, you always want to make sure that you're getting the best bang for the buck. And that's why I always bet with MyBookie. Listen, at MyBookie, you can bet on all your favorite sports with exclusive promotions, contests, and more to find your winning bet. Now, right now, when you make your first deposit at MyBookie, you'll instantly receive double, that's right, double your first deposit. It's easy. All you have to do is go to mybookie.ag. That's mybookie.ag. You sign up. Use my promo code BELFORT. That's capital BELFORT. And MyBookie will double your first deposit instantly up to $1,000. How's that for some fast money? This promotion is only available for a limited time, so don't miss out, please. You want to do this. Click on the link below and use my promo code. Again, that's capital BELFORT, Belfort, to secure your double deposit bonus today. China, in its entire history, almost since its inception thousands of years ago, they never attack outside their borders. So they're not, I really believe that, the threat of China, I don't see China as going out there and invading other countries the way the Soviet Union did back in the 40s, 50s, and I don't see that. I see it more, they're doing it through economic invasion, as you said, through Belt and Road, right? And, going in and, I did a lot of business and do business in Africa, and the Chinese were notorious for coming in and, bringing in their own people, stripping out the wealth, not building things that would last, not really putting infrastructure in place that would benefit the local communities, and there you go. But I don't think the risk with China is really one of military, where they're going to go out and start attacking in Europe like that. I think maybe perhaps at one point Taiwan represents an issue, but frankly, it's a very in geopolitically in the whole world. I don't think that's the issue with China. I think I agree. I think the biggest issue with China is the idiotic move the U.S. made by allowing all of our manufacturing to be basically decimated, gutted, and moved first to China and then to other places with cheaper labor. And if you want to blame someone, let's blame McKinsey, by the way, the consultants that organized that and convinced the U.S. government, the lobbyists, to allow to gut the U.S., the manufacturing base. It's idiotic to me that it happened, but it happened, right? You can't just be a consumer and not a producer in this world and expect it to end well. Like the U.S. has shifted from becoming basically all we do is produce information, by the way, so we're really good at that still, right? But in terms of products and things like that, the U.S. has allowed itself to go into this position where we're just, and what happens? Wealth flows out of the country into other countries that are actually producing stuff, right? I think that's the biggest issue. But again, I go back to one thing. So I get it. Like China made a lot when they banned Bitcoin. I was like, of course they'd want to do that. That makes perfect sense to me, right? And on some level, that's the advantage that an autocracy like that has, where they could just say, done. It's all. We want to build a dam. Leave your house, or we're going to just bulldoze your house down, right? Well, the U.S. will be 85 lawsuits. They'll take 20 years to go to the Supreme Court. So they have this sort of advantage in some regard like that, where they could do what they want when they want without moral consequences or litigation, right? So it made sense. But I guess the question is, what happens? So let's just say Bitcoin becomes the dominant form of money. Let's just project out 20 years down the road. Do you think that Bitcoin will ultimately become the dominant form of money for transactions as opposed to store value?
It's a really good question. I don't know, to be honest. That's the thing. I just don't know. My expectation is that on a long enough time frame, it is possible. Will we see it in my lifetime? No. But what does the dominant form of money mean? Right now, I think we're in a world of
global reserve currency. Let's look at that.
I think it can become the global reserve currency because it mathematically makes sense as something that you should hold. I mean, it's outperforming gold now. There was an article that came out this week that said historic holders of gold are moving across to Bitcoin. So it makes sense because it offers so many advantages over gold. So I think it can become the global reserve currency, and I think it can become something that is used for transactions. But will it become the actual dominant currency for day-to-day transactions? I don't know. Bitcoin has some issues with that. It's a legal tender now in El Salvador, but it doesn't make sense every time to just spend your Bitcoin. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So it's a complicated problem. But what I do think is that I think within 10 years, the market capitalization of Bitcoin will be ahead of gold. I mean, we're over $1 trillion now. Gold's around 10 trillion. I think within 10 years, we will surpass that. I'm very confident of that. I'm confident a lot of money is going to go into Bitcoin over this next decade. So yes, will it become the dominant reserve currency of the world? Yes, I believe that. Will it become the dominant transactional currency? I think that will take a lot longer because you have to see. You need two things for that. You need a bit more stability in the price, and you need the collapse of sovereign currencies, and that's to be seen.
The collapse of sovereign currencies. You say that's going to be important in the shift to using Bitcoin, and you think at this point it's Bitcoin and Bitcoin only. There is no other type of currency or other crypto that's going to come in and surpass it or supplant it.
No, I don't think so. And I think for a few reasons. There's a few unique things about Bitcoin. I think its origin story of this mysterious creator, we don't know who it is, who's disappeared. I think that's.
I thought it's the guy I thought it's the guy from England.
No, it's not that fucking idiot.
What? So what happened with that? Look, I want to talk about that. So what?
I can't talk about that.
Is it still in litigation?
It's still in litigation. Yeah, so I can't talk about it.
So this guy is taking credit. He says he's Satoshi Nakamoto. Is that the story? That's the story.
That's what he's claiming. That's what he's claiming, yes.
And is he suing just you or other people as well?
He's suing multiple people for different reasons. He's in multiple lawsuits at the moment. So he's in one with myself, one with a guy, a Twitter pseudonym called Hodlernaut. He's also being sued by Copa, which is a group that's, I think it's headed up by Square, which is part of Jack Dorsey's empire. They're suing his claims. He's also in a lawsuit which goes to jury trial here in the US in November with regards to the brother of a guy called Dave Kleiman, who some people suggest that they may have created Bitcoin together. So he's got multiple lawsuits, but I can't specifically talk about my litigation.
I have a theory. On who invented Bitcoin. Ready? And it's kind of funny, but so all these years I am just like, there's no way the U.S. is going to allow this to happen. It so runs counter to all U.S. interests. It really does. And I really believe today that if the U.S. could turn back the clock 5 years, they would step in and stop Bitcoin. I really believe that now. I think it's too late. And that's why I'm long a lot of Bitcoin and other cryptos as well. So I do dabble in other stuff as well. Everything but shit coins, which I detest with all my heart and soul. But I do have other cryptos that I believe have strong use cases and potential. And they're not designed to fuck people over. They're actually designed to work. Whether they will or not, separate issue. But at least they're designed to try to do something good. But I believe that they would definitely stop it unless they were Satoshi. The U.S. itself is Satoshi Nakamoto. And the reason I say that is because it will be the greatest gag of all time. How do you get rid of the budget deficit? Oh, it's really fucking simple. Just at the end, guess what? We're Satoshi. We got 84 trillion in Bitcoin, and we are the global reserve bank because it's the U.S. That would be the greatest fuck you to the world. The funniest thing ever, by the way.
Do you know what? You're not the only person who's thought that. Other people have thought that.
I've thought that for years, by the way. I know it's a long shot, but I say it's really funny though.
It would be
classic.
It would be a great story. But I just want to finish the point on why I don't think you can bet a Bitcoin, because the great thing about the people who think they can make a better Bitcoin think it comes down to technology. They think it's if we can do faster transactions or if we can do cheaper transactions, it makes a better Bitcoin. Firstly, they're wrong about the speed and the cost, because the Bitcoin is both instant through Lightning and reliable and comes at low cost. But by the by, the reason Bitcoin is the best form of currency is not down to just technology. It's down to the trust in the system. It's a trustless system, but it's the trust we all have in the system. It's the most decentralized. It has the best people working on it, and it's the most trusted. The monetary policy has never changed. It's been fixed at 21 million coins with an issuance rate that halves every 4 years. It's the most simple monetary policy in the world, and we all know it. We all understand it. We all play by the same rules. So there won't be anything ever created that's better than Bitcoin. And then, some people say, look, well, there must be, yes, it's a non-zero chance. Something might come along that's better. But it's going to be really difficult because it's going to really struggle to have the same origin story. It's going to really struggle to have the same network effects. You could probably design a better internet now, or a better eBay now, or you could probably design a better Google in some ways. But the network effects mean you own this market. I mean, Google right now is a bit shit. It's the best search engine in the world. Whenever you do a search, your first half a page is just
terrible.
Adverts.
It's absolutely terrible. Google has become, to me, it's almost close to worthless at this point as a search engine right now. It really is, because all you see are advertisements.
But its network effects mean that it's going to get you the best results ever. And there are other search engines out there that people like. People really like DuckDuckGo, but for some reason, you just locked in this using Google again. eBay, you could definitely design a better eBay, but you're not going to go anywhere else because it's got the most buyers and the most sellers. So these network effects are important, and Bitcoin has the best network effect of all cryptocurrencies. So it has the best origin story, it's the most decentralized, and it has the best network effect. So the idea that something's going to come along and better it for me, is very, very low chance.
There's two sides to the network effect here, right? So Bitcoin does not have a traditional network effect. In other words, if you were to really say what would a network effect be for a currency, that would mean that stores would accept it and people would use it. The currency requires it to be used in transactions, theoretically. So to me, there's very little network effect as a currency. What you have is a network effect as a store of value right now, because a lot of people think it's a store of value, it becomes a store of value, but there's very little network effect as an actual currency that's being used. it's almost the opposite in the sense that the more people that get involved in Bitcoin, this is one of the earlier theses I had with Bitcoin when I thought the government was going to shut it down. I'm like, so the more people that get involved in Bitcoin, the worse it is for Bitcoin because the harder it is to get the next bunch of suckers to go in at the higher price. That's how it traditionally works in these type of things. And I know that for a fact because I've been in all these illiquid small things that in the beginning that it's actually a negative. The more people that get involved, because Bitcoin's a Ponzi scheme, like everything else. It's a legal Ponzi scheme because all money's a Ponzi schemes. I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just, it is. It's always about the next people getting in because without that, it goes, if everyone was to try to sell it once, it's worth zero. Same thing with the US dollar though. So I'm not trying to say it even in a negative way, but that's the thesis of how things work with money. It's all based on people buying it and believing, and the more people that, so the biggest, to me, the biggest bull case for Bitcoin is the fact that if you just, based on adoption over time right now, that adoption is still very small. And I believe based on the chart curve right now, especially with institutions now starting to dabble, that just based on adoption, you could make a 10x case on this thing pretty easily. That would, work out mathematically. But in the earlier days, that works against you because the more people that get in, the harder it is to get twice as many. You follow what I'm saying?
I do. I mean, yes and no. I don't think of it like the Ponzi scheme because a Ponzi scheme has a specific description. It pays people out from the funds. It pays the new investor out from the funds from the early investors. Bitcoin doesn't do that because you don't actually need to sell Bitcoin. So I always
no. But how does someone Bitcoin only goes up by more people getting involved in Bitcoin, and your ability to sell it's always based on someone new coming in to buy it. But everything is, I don't mean it's a negative. I'll tell you what, let me stop. Let me explain it. Let me qualify. What makes a Ponzi scheme bad is when people don't know it's a Ponzi scheme. When everyone knows what's going on, it becomes legitimate because it is what it is. That's how all things work in economics, how money works. And there's any form, even gold. What makes gold is that someone's going to come in. If no one wants to buy it, it's always someone buying it at a higher price that gives it value. So what makes a Ponzi scheme is when you think it's a business, but they're actually just paying you back with other people's money. Here, it's other people's money, so it takes any illegitimacy out of it. It's just a mathematical equation. That's what I mean.
Yeah, but the problem with the Ponzi scheme is that it collapses because there's no money left to pay the original investors back in. So it collapses because it becomes worthless. Bitcoin is like a free market for a currency. So they're just buyers and sellers and the price goes up and the price goes down. But it doesn't collapse because there isn't any money in the system like exists in a Ponzi scheme. I think.
But what about in 2017 when they were artificially creating Tether to support the price of Bitcoin so people would be able to sell and keep the price artificial? I believe that there was a time in 2017 when there was things going on that were not right.
Well, that's an unproven allegation. I don't think they were artificially printing Tether to support the price of Bitcoin. Okay. I don't think that happened. I think that's an unproven allegation.
But it's still under investigation. But anyway, separate issue. But I do think there was a time. I'm very much convinced of that. But anyway, separate issue.
But that would make Tether the Ponzi, not Bitcoin.
No, it would make Tether colluding with Bitcoin or to be a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, I don't buy it. I don't think Bitcoin. Okay. I think Bitcoin is a free market for money which you can buy and sell, and there is only 21 million Bitcoin, and there's a market value for it. But I think what's happening with a lot of Bitcoins is this mindset shift that you have. Like, I don't think about Bitcoin about what price I can sell it for. I think about just accumulating Bitcoin and ideally never selling much of it. It's just accumulating my wealth and building my wealth with it. And I'm
why?
Confident.
Why? Why? Because you think it's going up.
Where do you? No. It's like, where do you want to hold your money? So, do I want to hold my money in pounds? Do I want to hold it in property? Do I want to hold it gold? Do I want to hold it in Bitcoin? I have a small amount in property. I have a small amount in pounds, a small amount in dollars, but the majority in Bitcoin because I believe it's the best form of money. I believe it's what will maintain value the best and also, increase in value. Of course, I believe it'll increase in value, but I don't think of it like a Ponzi. That's not something that crosses my mind. What I think of it is we are remonetizing the world. We now have a better form of money, and when people understand Bitcoin, when they really understand it, they don't think about when am I going to sell it. They think about how much more can I buy? How can I keep my money in this?
That's not money. That's a store. That's not money. In other words, you don't money
Well, but
is used to live and have and to go and buy and sell and run an economy. That's not money. What you're talking about.
well, it's a tricky thing because Bitcoin, like some people are like, oh, is it a store of wealth? Is it a medium of exchange? Bitcoin's kind of unique. It's the first asset which is really both. I mean, gold arguably is, but I can't, Jordan, if I wanted to send you some money now, I can send you some dollars on PayPal or I can send you some Bitcoin. I can't really send you any gold. So Bitcoin is both a store of value and a currency. Yeah. So Bitcoin is essentially taken all the best qualities of gold and fiat currencies and got rid of the worst qualities. So it ends up becoming this well-designed, mathematically best form of money in the world. So yes, I expect it to, on a long enough time frame, I expect it always goes up in value.
Does it bother you that so much Bitcoin is held in a few concentrated wallets?
That's their problem, not mine. You know, I think one of the interesting things about Bitcoin is that
isn't that like in some level, like, okay, so Satoshi's wallet is worth how much right now? You probably know better than me.
So it's a million Bitcoin. So what is that? Is that 50 billion or is that 5 billion? I wouldn't be able to do the math off the top of my head.
Billion.
Say 50 billion? Yeah, 50 billion. Yeah. 50 billion.
Okay. And then you have all
that doesn't bother
these
me.
people that were sort of early adopters that have just massive concentrations of this. You know, how is that fair? How is that sort of an egalitarian thing to all the other people in the world that weren't early adopters? How is that a fair transaction to them?
Define fair.
Fair meaning based on hard work and people going out or the average person every single day going out there and trying to feed their family, build a company or build wealth just to have enough to live and prosper and take care of their children and grandchildren, versus some people that happen to be early adopters that have this new massive wealth concentrated in this small group. So what do you think? How do you think all the other people feel?
I think one of the hardest problems in the world to solve is being fair with money. I think any attempts to try and be fair with money leads you down to a highly socialist, even communist route, where we try and have a redistribution of income to try and create equity, and that usually fails. It usually doesn't work.
Don't you think this has been a redistribution of income, though? In some level, that's what's happening. It's been a redistribution to these small group of early adopters that many people would say do not deserve to have the wealth that they've got. They got lucky or whatever. I'm not saying I believe this. I'm playing devil's advocate with you. I want your answer to this.
I understand your point. It's like I don't think of them as early adopters. I think of them as early risk takers. Now, Bitcoin is a much safer buy right now at $64,000 than it was at $1,200, and a much, much safer buy at $1,200 than it was at $30, because as Bitcoin, as the life of Bitcoin continues, it becomes stronger. It becomes a bigger network. It has more technology built on top of it. It has more people using it. So it's a much safer buy now.
I agree with that. I agree with that thesis.
So those people took risks. Elon Musk took risks when he created business. Jeff Bezos takes risks. And even outside of risk takers, people have inheritance where they get things which they didn't work for, that their family worked for. So look, it's just it has, Bitcoin is fair in that anyone can buy Bitcoin. Anyone can create a miner and start mining Bitcoin. Anyone can join the network and earn Bitcoin. Just because some people took a risk early on, good for them. Some people buy a lottery ticket. Good for them. It's any attempt to create a system.
Okay, so you think that all the other people that which is the majority of the world that did not do this, sorry, you missed out. Buy now.
No, but nobody's missed out. No, that's the point. It's nobody's missed out. At any point, anyone can go and start accumulating Bitcoin and start protecting their wealth and growing their wealth through it. Anyone can do it. They could start today. Now, I don't think there's any way of trying to create a fair system, because defining fair is really difficult. Communists will argue communism is the fairest form of an economy, a perfect redistribution of income, but we know where that leads to. So we just have to accept we live in a capitalist economy, we have free markets, and Bitcoin is the ultimate free market.
Let's switch subjects for a second and go from Bitcoin to everything else, right?
Yeah.
My problem with crypto, and I'm heavily involved in crypto, what I really dislike about crypto more than anything are shitcoins. And it drives me crazy right now which is probably rich. People say, he? After what he did? Yeah, after what, yeah. Because I
Him?
know, oh, okay, yeah, right. But no, but listen, you know what? I know I made mistakes when I was younger. But,
Yep.
I admit that. And what is it? It gives me even, I think, a better purview to really understand, the dark side of that. But what's happening right now is there's massive, unprecedented amounts of fraud going on in cryptocurrency. It's just incredible. And it's out there
Yep.
brazenly in the open. It's happening every single day. And people are getting decimated by this all over the world. And many people are getting rich. And I think that is a huge issue. And it
Yep.
poisons the overall legitimacy of Bitcoin. I think that gives Bitcoin a very bad name. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, it's a really good point. I mean, I agree with you. I can't stand shitcoins. I hate this ability for a fund to invest 20 million in pre-sale tokens for a new protocol that's going to launch. Then it launches. They've got a ridiculously low price. It goes onto the open market, which boosts up the price, and they can turn 20 million into hundreds of millions for a protocol that will be barely used or will possibly die. And this has happened over and over again. This if you can go on CoinMarketCap, there's thousands of these cryptocurrencies, and really all they do
Thousands
is
of them. It's unbelievable.
yeah. The majority of them just make the early people rich and these things die. I think actually what it does, though, I think this is good for Bitcoin because it proves why Bitcoin matters. It proves why Bitcoin is the most important cryptocurrency. It's, to me, the only true cryptocurrency. It proves it because it didn't have any venture fund. It was bootstrapped by a team of nerds, and early risk takers. And it was the most fair launch you could possibly have of any cryptocurrency. So I think I'm with you. I don't like them, Jordan. I think they're bullshit. And we're seeing it again and again. Every year, new ones are created. People get rich off it. But for people to get rich off it, somebody else is losing. And that to me is really sad. When you see these VCs making hundreds of millions in return, who are all the people's lives who've been decimated by buying this shit, hoping they're going to get rich and failing? So I think I agree with you, and I think it can harm Bitcoin. But I think also, if you really look at the narrative, if you really understand what's happening, it's actually good for Bitcoin.
Do you think any of these protocols have value? And should they be painted with a broad brush, or you think they're just all absolutely worthless?
Well, this is where I clash with some of the Bitcoiners because somebody said to me, like, Ethereum has no value. And I was like, well, some people using it are getting value from it. So value is subjective to the individual. If you use it, if you buy an NFT, which I don't like, I've never bought an NFT, I don't care about NFTs. But if you buy an NFT and you think that has value, then it has value to you. So I think you can make certain arguments about Ethereum having value to people. I just have no interest in it. I just think it's not interesting. I think ultimately it will collapse under its own weight eventually. I think you can make arguments that Solana has value to people. So you can make arguments that these things have value to the individual. I don't care about these things. I care about money, and I care about good, sound money, and I care about how good money can make the world a better place, and it can make economies stronger, and it can protect people's wealth. And the only one that can do that's Bitcoin. So that's the one I'm interested in.
If you're having trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, then one of the best things you can possibly do is start getting enough magnesium. But please don't just run to the store and buy the first magnesium supplement that you find. There are actually 7 unique forms of magnesium, and you have to get all of them if you want to experience the calming, sleep-enhancing effects of it. And that's why I recommend Magnesium Breakthrough by Bioptimizers. You simply take 2 caps before bedtime, and you'll be amazed by how much better you feel in the morning when you wake up and how much just better you sleep that night. So for an exclusive offer just for my listeners only, go to magbreakthrough.com/Wolfsden and use the code Wolfsden10 to save 10% when you try Magnesium Breakthrough. And for a limited time here, Bioptimizers is also giving away free bottles of their best-selling products, P3-OM and Masszymes with select purchases. So go to magbreakthrough.com/Wolfsden and get your exclusive 10% discount, plus the chance to get more than $50 worth of supplements for free. All right, want to grow your business, diversify your content? You're not going to find a better tool out there than Melon for your live streaming needs. blazing fast response time, low CPU usage, all available right in your browser. Go to melonapp.com/wolf and start streaming today. Your strategy is, I buy Bitcoin with every dollar I have, and I'm never going to sell it, and that's that. That's your strategy. In a nutshell.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah,
So,
pretty much.
does that bore you ever? Like there's no, so okay, so what do you do for a living?
I mean, I have a podcast.
Okay. No, my point is, no, I'm not even being facetious because this is a really big issue. Because I'm actually writing a book right now about this very thing. And I'll tell you what the thesis of my book is. It's an investment book to help young people and older people too, but primarily it's geared towards people in their teens and 20s that are just getting into the investment world. And it's basically saying that it's been proven throughout the last 70, 80, 90 years that the best way, safest way, the most lucrative way to grow wealth is simply to buy the S&P in an ETF and hold it and never sell it and reinvest the dividends. And all this nonsense on Wall Street with trading back and forth and hedge funds and mutual funds, it's all noise and distractions meant to separate you from your money. And the math fucking proves it. Warren Buffett made a bet 10 years ago and he killed the competition, said all you hedge funds with all your 2 and 20s, it's all bullshit because after the fees are deducted, the management fees, the office fees, the freaking commissions, the taxes, you will not be able to, I'll guarantee the S&P will outperform all of you. And he won the bet, right? So I think that there's no secret. That's like the worst kept secret on Wall Street, that you're better off just investing your money in the S&P. Everyone knows it. But human beings have a need for uncertainty as well as for certainty. So try to tell some kid who's 21 years old and hearing stories online about his friends making a fortune in the latest shitcoin or meme stock or whatever. It's just too hard to do that. Because like you're saying, what you're saying makes sense. See, I actually agree with you. I wasn't saying you're wrong. I'm just saying, so what do you do for a living? Because I'm just like opening up a line like, okay, great. So fucking boring. Like, even though it's probably the right financial move, human nature is such that you hear about this and you want action, you want variety. So like the point is that, like, you know, while it makes sense, we get attracted to these short-term shiny objects because we want to be able to talk about it at least it used to be, want to talk about the office water cooler and, you know, in chat rooms and online. So, you know, if you're just sitting there with this I have a friend, a very close friend. I'm actually partners in a decentralized wallet, in Monarch Wallet. My friend, Robert Beatles, is exactly, he just buys Bitcoin, only Bitcoin, never sells it unless he has to do it to buy some property or something. And he's very pure, right? But, you know, his outlet was he built a wallet and he has all these other businesses. But so like, 'cause it's kind of boring to do that.
Yes, but I'll tell you an interesting story. The fastest million I ever made was with cryptocurrencies when I was trying to trade them. Okay, it was the fastest million I've ever made, and the fastest million I ever lost was doing exactly. Fastest loss was doing exactly the same. I went from zero to a millionaire to zero again in less than a year. The best way I've built wealth is to flip the script. It's to change my preference on life and time preference. So what I decided is, like, I'm going to build a business, which I've done. I've built this podcast, and it generates really solid
and then you put
revenues.
your profits into Bitcoin.
Yeah,
right.
and I put my profits into
That was my
Bitcoin,
point.
and I ride Bitcoin up. Yeah, and do you know what? By being boring, I've essentially created generational wealth for myself and my children, which is brilliant. Like, I'm in a really good position now where I don't have to worry about money. I'm not rich. I'm never going to be super rich, but I enjoy life. I get to travel the world. I get to talk to people. I do a job I love. And, you know, and I don't have to worry about money. My kids can go to college. I can afford my mortgage, and I can treat my family. And I've done that by it's like anything. It's when you try and rush, when you're desperate to make money, you take risks, and you end up maybe taking silly risks, and you end up gambling. I don't gamble now. I'm 42. I'm 43 in a week. I've got no need to gamble anymore. It's the hare and the tortoise, and I'll happily be the tortoise, and I'm enjoying being the tortoise.
In fact, you just stated it, which is also part of my thesis and why I'm writing this book. So I start the book by saying, listen, you know, the truth is the truth, and mathematically, just fucking buy the S&P if you want to invest in the stock. You'll end up a lot better off. But I know you're not going to follow that advice, because if you're 21 years old, you can afford to take risks at 21. You probably should take some risks at 21, and you're gonna, you know. So this idea is, as you get older, taking risks. You have to be more careful, because to lose all your money when you're 23 is very different when you're 47 with a family and responsibility. So like the time to risk. So this idea is showing people to start, because the equivalent would be to start investing in Bitcoin. And I'm going to go through that as well. So sort of this alternative to the S&P would be Bitcoin. Bitcoin to me represents the S&P of crypto. It's like one bet, you're betting on just that, and over the long term will probably outperform everything else, right? But there's all this other shit that everyone's going to do anyway. So the idea is to show people how to successfully, or let's say as successful as possible, to play in all these other arenas while you're building wealth safely, to put some of your money into S&P, or in the case Bitcoin, and then as you get older, keep increasing the percentage that you're putting into this sort of safer, that is going to pretty much, you never know, but like over historically is going to, we've learned it grows over time, and then speculate with less and less, and by the time you're in your 50s, you should probably be going almost exclusively with the safer stuff and speculate with only enough to have fun you can afford to lose. That's sort of the thesis of the book, is trying to stop people from getting slaughtered by just going after shiny objects.
And a very simple rule, like I've got my son 17. I wish I'd done this. Imagine at age 18, I'd put 10%, everything I had away, I saved, put it into some kind of high interest performing account, something or other, and that the compound growth I probably would have made more money doing that than I have in the last few years.
That's what I'm trying to accomplish with this book. Yeah.
Yeah. You've just, I think, and one of the problems, Jordan, is we don't teach financial literacy to children. I'm teaching my kids, right? But we don't. In schools, we teach them to memorize facts when they have a supercomputer in their pocket. We don't teach them skills like financial literacy, and that's what we should be teaching.
I agree. I totally agree with that. So where do you see this whole? Let's just go back to DeFi for a second, because it really interests me. Because on the other side, again, we have to, let's step out of our U.S.-centric view. Is there a need for DeFi and the ability for people living in these countries that don't have a banking system that really functions, they don't have access to stable money, but also the ability to borrow money at interest? Do you think that DeFi with crypto has any use case, or you think it's all just nonsense?
Well, it has use case because people are using it. That's the point. People are using it.
Well, no, I'm going to say use cases that are better than solving a problem that can't be solved with a traditional mainstream financial system.
People are able to take out loans in DeFi. It exists. There are financial markets within DeFi. My problem isn't with the financial markets themselves. I think there are value to them. My problem is the underlying protocols, which I think are risky. We've just seen with too many of these DeFi protocols, we've seen too many rug pulls, smart contracts get hacked, go wrong, and significant. So we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of millions be lost. So I think there is a use case for DeFi, but my issue with it is I don't trust the underlying protocol, so I don't want to use it myself.
So you would just say your recommendation would be to avoid all of this stuff, even when you see these, huge interest rates that are like 8,000% interest, getting paid. You think it's just a red flag to it's just no way it's legitimate?
Yeah. It's just, I think the underlying protocols have too much risk with them. But how that risk manifests itself, long term, I don't know. Do the protocols themselves collapse potentially? Or is it just that there's rug pulls that happen where a huge amount of money is lost? It's just something, for me, it's too risky. I hold my Bitcoin in a multi-sig wallet. Nobody can hack it. Nobody can steal it. I can spend and use it as I choose.
What wallet do you use, by the way? What wallet do you recommend people should use?
I use a Casa multi-sig wallet, but I use multiple wallets. I have a Casa multi-sig wallet, which I use for my long-term deep cold storage that not even someone with a gun can get from me. I have Exodus wallet on my phone, which I have a small amount for day-to-day, and I also use Blue wallet, which is a Lightning wallet, which I have a small amount of spendable Bitcoin on as well.
So explain, what's the big, let's go through the stable, explain the stable one, the big one, what's that?
The Casa, so it's a multi-sig wallet. So the way multi-sig works is that if you want to send a transaction, you have to sign it with multiple wallets. So you have one on your phone, and then you distribute those geographically, maybe into different countries. So even if somebody comes to your house with a gun and says, "Send me your Bitcoin," it's like, fine, yeah, okay. Well, I can send it, and we have to now get on a plane and go here, and I have to sign another wallet, or we have to drive here. So it's a way to, it's like a super protection for your Bitcoin in that multiple wallets have to sign it. Now that's going to be overkill for $1,000 of Bitcoin, right? You want that if you've got hundreds of thousands or millions. So if you just want a day-to-day wallet, something like the Exodus wallet, which I have on my phone, which I keep a few $100s of Bitcoin in, so when I'm traveling around, if I need it, I can just spend it at will. But I also, like I said, I have a Lightning wallet. Lightning is an additional layer on Bitcoin. So people listening who don't understand Bitcoin, if I send you Bitcoin now on the base chain, it'll take about an hour to confirm for you to actually have that. Now, there's a reason for that. It's to protect the decentralization of Bitcoin. We could spend hours talking about this. But in order to make Bitcoin fast, a layer was built on top of it called the Lightning Network, whereby people open channels, and it's like a peer-to-peer network to be able to send Bitcoin. But if I send you Bitcoin over Lightning, you would receive it instantly.
And what's the downside of Lightning? Why don't more people embrace it?
Well, they are. So it's growing at a very, very fast rate. There's no real downside to Lightning apart from the fact you don't want to send huge transactions. So I could send you $1 billion on the base chain with no worry, no risk at all, and just send it and it goes. If you're sending more than a couple of $100s on Lightning, it might fail because the network isn't big enough. It's still growing. Now that it will grow, it will get bigger, but I don't think people will ever settle $1 billion on the Lightning Network. Think of it a bit like any kind of financial system. Think of the base chain as the settlement layer and the Lightning Network as the transactional layer. What
are your thoughts on Bitcoin Cash?
It's a shitcoin. I don't dislike Roger Ver. He's been good to me and he's been good to other people, but I think Bitcoin Cash was a mistake. It was a misunderstanding of what Bitcoin is and how Bitcoin scales, and I think sadly the people who've bought into that will have or may have lost a lot of money.
Why is that? Tell me why.
Well, because Bitcoin outperforms Bitcoin Cash. So if you held Bitcoin Cash instead of Bitcoin, the dollar value, the dollar representation of what you held would be much higher by holding Bitcoin.
Well, I understand it's an investment, but because adoption's been more. But what's wrong with Bitcoin Cash itself? Is there something fundamentally wrong with it, or just the branding of Bitcoin was too strong that Bitcoin Cash was not able to disrupt? It was first mover advantage, or is there something fundamentally wrong with Bitcoin Cash?
I think it's both. I think it's that's true, but I also think it's the way Bitcoin Cash wants to scale. Bitcoin Cash wants to scale on the base chain. It doesn't want to scale through layers.
Explain that difference. Explain that difference to everyone.
Okay, so the way Bitcoin is decentralized is that every 10 minutes there is a block, and it's a block of transactions, and that it would say 1 megabit in size. And the reason it's 1 megabit in size, and the reason we don't want to make it more than 1 megabit is we want Bitcoin to be decentralized. We want you to run a node, I to run a node, a guy over in Indonesia to run a node, a lady down in Chile to run it. Anyone can run a node, but when you run a node, you have an entire copy of the blockchain, which at the moment say 300 gigabytes. That's the complete history of Bitcoin in 300 gigabytes. Any laptop can hold that. I went to buy a new Mac recently. You can get a 4 terabyte drive. So it's very easy for someone to be able to get a whole copy of the blockchain. Now, if you want to have faster and more transactions on the base chain, you have to increase the size of that block from 1 megabyte to maybe 10 megabytes or 20 megabytes. When you do that, you increase the blow to the blockchain, which means somebody maybe in Indonesia who doesn't have a 2 terabyte hard drive can't run a node. So we want everyone to be able to run a node, and we do that by keeping the block size small. And that keeps it decentralized, which protects it from state intervention. Does that make sense?
Got it. Yes. Yep. Now, so you think Bitcoin Cash, so now go back to this. So the problem with Bitcoin Cash is?
It doesn't have the network effect of Bitcoin. It doesn't have the security of Bitcoin. And it's designed in a way that it can't scale that Bitcoin does. So ultimately, Bitcoin Cash fails.
And so, but Roger is, you think you respect Roger, though? You think Roger is a good guy, and listen, I think you have winners and losers, right? I mean, so you think he was an early adopter of Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with him on Bitcoin Cash, but Roger's done things for me in the past when I needed help with something. I reached out to him and he helped me with something. He also supported Ross Ulbricht's legal costs with regards to he's a guy who created the Silk Road. So I think I think Roger has a good heart. I think his view on what a better world is right. We just disagree on how that's solved through cryptocurrency.
Sure. What do you think? Going back to Silk Road for a second, I watched the movie about 6 months ago, and what do you think about that? What do you think? I mean, it seems a bit unfair what they did to this guy, don't you think?
Well, listen, anyone asks about the Silk Road and whether this guy should spend his life in jail, I would say go and read what the Drug Policy Alliance said about the Silk Road. The Silk Road reduced violence in the drug system. It reduced violence because you went from... and a great example of this is before, if you want to buy weed, you'd have to go to a Tesco car park, whether it be a Walmart car park here, wait for a guy maybe to turn up, and it was a bit risky and it wasn't great, and the trade behind it's criminal. We've now in the US legalized or decriminalized marijuana in the majority of states, and now it's a professionalized industry. You go into a store, you get advice, you can buy all different types of products, and the world has not collapsed. What the Silk Road did is it took violence out of the system because it professionalized it. So the dealers had to sell a better product, and you didn't have to go and meet somebody in a random place and risk violence. So people do not stop taking drugs just because it's illegal. People are going to take drugs whatever. So why have a system designed to perpetuate violence and reward criminals? It's completely pointless. So Ross Ulbricht solved a problem. If the Silk Road still existed now, it would probably be the most valuable company in the world. It'd probably be bigger than Apple. He solved the drugs trade, but the U.S. government deemed it illegal. He had to forfeit all his Bitcoin, and he's going to spend the rest of his life in jail. I mean, it's completely ridiculous. Now, look. Should he have gone to jail? Perhaps. We can argue yes or no. Should he spend his entire life in jail? I think we can argue no. That's completely pointless. What harm will he do to the world if he's on the streets? It's not like he's a career criminal. It's not like he's violent. It's not like he's a rapist and you have to worry about what he's going to do. He would come out and he would serve the community. So keeping him in jail for the rest of his life, I think, is itself a crime.
So just to wrap things up here, very interesting conversation for sure. Obviously, we don't know where Bitcoin's going in the future, the price. We think it's going up. If you had to say by end of the year, what are your thoughts between now and do you have any sort of sense for people listening where you think Bitcoin ends up on December 31?
Yeah, it's. I've got a bet about it actually because a friend of mine thinks it's going to go over. He thinks it's going to go over $300,000, and I said no chance, and we've got an under over that. So I've got the under. He's got the over. He's very confident. Look, Bitcoin does these strange things in a bull market, and we are in the closing stages of a bull market where it can rally. I think the chance of it going over 100,000 is very high. I think the chance of it going over 150,000 is good. I think it could go over I think it could go up to maybe two. I think the max it goes is to about 220. But again, like anyone listening is thinking, oh shit, I should buy it because of that. I say to them, don't buy it because you think it's going to go to 150,000 at the end of the year. But buy it because in 10 years it's going to outperform anything else you will own.
I'll tell you a funny story. So I got involved with Bitcoin because of a guy named Robert Beatles. You know him? Do you know Beatles?
No, I don't. I've known the name.
Yeah, he started Monarch Wallet, and I'm a partner in that. And he's a great guy. He's just a brilliant guy. Very much like you in terms of like he just loves Bitcoin, thinks that everything else is just like, it's not worth. It's just like, he's just very sure that he's a purist, right? And we had a bet. So I've been friends with him. I was always a bear in Bitcoin for reasons I've previously stated, right? And he was the first person that really made a sober case to me that, this sort of store of value versus the dollars will be gone in 2 years and everyone will use Bitcoin. I just thought that it's going to 1 million. He was like, that's just nonsense. And he sort of had this very sober look. And I started really taking a second look at it. And I became bullish maybe about 2 years ago, year and a half ago, right? But at the end of maybe around this time of last year, and or maybe it was, I want to say September, we made a bet where Bitcoin was going to close the year. I bet it would not break 10,000, and he bet it was going to be much higher than 10,000. And we bet $25,000, and needless to say, I lost that bet, right? I'm happy I did, by the way, because I hedged it by buying Bitcoin. but this year, I really am pretty confident. Like, I have no fucking clue, just so you know. So, like, who knows where it's going, right? But I have a sense. I said this about 6 months ago. Well, I think 110,000, and it's kind of tracking that. It's kind of like easing in that direction. But as you said, Bitcoin does some really odd things sometimes, right? Sometimes you're like, what the hell? Even the other day, like, it just gets on these little weird bull runs. It's like 20% in a day. You're like, wow, it's, strange because people, the way it's one of the beauties of Bitcoin, I think the most genius thing of all, there's many things that are genius. There's so much about it that makes it sticky. It's like it's much easier to buy than to sell. Not that it's not liquid, because it is liquid, but it's just sort of the way it's all engineered. It's sort of it's easy to buy, and then it's kind of like you don't really want to sell it. It's like so really.
You don't ever want to sell it.
It's really interesting how when you get into it, you're like whatever. It's sort of like it's like you wouldn't just sell your Apple stock to like go pay for pizza, But anyway, we'll see. And
you never want to sell that.
And Ethereum end of the year.
I had no idea. Don't care.
No idea. Don't care. All right. Anyway, listen, Peter, thanks for coming on the show. I wish you luck with everything, especially your lawsuit, which I assume you'll win because it just sounds like fucking nonsense to me, the whole thing. But who knows? I don't really know I don't know much about it. I just I read about it online, and but I wish you the best. And I'm actually I'm going to start a podcast about crypto myself because I really think it's important. I think it's a really interesting space that I think people really need to know a lot more about it and make their own decisions,
Well, listen, I'm going to be in Miami later in the year. You should come on my show.
100%. So just let me know when you're in town here. I live right in I'm looking at the water right now. On the water, it's beautiful down here. So whenever you're down here, just, reach out and I will be glad to come on your show.
Peace out, man. Take care.
Take care. Good luck. Bye.